One of the original founders of INSEAD 50 years ago is today the honorary chairman of the INSEAD board after a long stint at the helm, and he's also the chairman of the International Council, and he is Claude Janssen. It's very good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Why did you agree to take on the job of creating a business school out here in the forest?
I was convinced after having gone to Harvard for 2 years for the business schools that we needed something similar in Europe, and in France in particular, that we didn't have. There were no business schools at the time. So all the 3 or 4 of us who were interested in the project had all the same conviction, and that's why I was part of that team.
What was your vision then? Did you have a plan in mind? What did you think of when you were starting all this?
Well, when we started, really, we all came out, we were very young, all of us, except Dorio. And we all had gone through the Harvard Business School, so we had that as a model. But we thought also that we were in Europe and that we should not duplicate the Harvard Business School as such, that we should inspire ourselves from the Harvard Business School, but not copy it. And so the idea was to do something similar, but not exactly the same. And this was also, as you know, in '57, the signature of the Treaty of Rome, which was the start of Europe. So immediately the idea came that we should do something non-French, but European. And so that's what made that we decided a business school, and European, which meant international from the start. Then there were 3 more ideas that came out immediately, which was that, pushed by Dorio, that it should be independent and not be part of a heavy university system, that it should be trilingual, which at the time was quite difficult, and it proved later on that it was, and that it should be somewhat entrepreneurial so that we would do things and not copy others.
Were there any women in the first class or the first few years?
No, the first women came 8 years later, in '67. The reason for that is that at the time, all schools, grandes écoles in France, were male only. And so was the Harvard Business School. The Harvard Business School admitted women from '63 or '64 on. So we were not alone in not admitting women.
Where did the initial money come from to get all of this going, and how did you then continue to get sources of funding?
So the story of the financial story of INSEAD is the following one. We started with money from the Paris Chamber of Commerce, who gave the seed money, but with the understanding that we would not count on them to balance the budgets every year. This was really seed money, and we had very soon to find ways of having our own resources without that help. So we decided also, and this was a novelty at the time, to have a fairly expensive program. The habits in France in particular was that education, and even superior education, university education, were free. So it was a novelty to have the students pay, and we helped that by creating a few scholarships and loans for the students and so on. But so the first resources came from the money that the students were paying. Then after 10 years, we developed executive education, and for another 20 years, the balance was really that executive education, which had surpluses, the surpluses were used to finance the school, including the other programs. And so for 20 years, we lived on that system. And then in the late 80s, 90s, we started to have not expensive programs like the PhD, where people don't pay. And we pushed research, so we needed additional resources that we could not derive from only the surpluses of executive education. That's when we started looking for money outside. We had started a bit in the 80s, but we launched a campaign in the 90s to finance basically research. And so we had 2 campaigns in a row, one in the late 93 to 2000, second one from 2004 to 2008. And that's how research and development was financed.
Going forward, I mean, you were chairman for 22 years, so you must have raised a lot of money in that time. But going forward, for the expansion, for example, the Abu Dhabi campus, the campus in Singapore that was opened several years ago, this costs a lot of money. How do you raise money for things like that?
Well, Singapore, we didn't really get a lot of money for that. We got help from Singapore, from the city of Singapore, state of Singapore, because they helped us find land, they gave us research projects and so on, but they did not really subsidize it. We took the financial risk, us INSEAD. And it turned out that it was a success very fast, so that it was not a big risk. But when we made the decision, it was a big risk. Abu Dhabi was different because there we were invited. We went to Abu Dhabi, and the Abu Dhabi government has largely financed implementation there. So it's different. In other places, it will depend when we go to places. But for the time being, the only place where we really got a lot of financial help from the local people who wanted us to go there is Abu Dhabi.
Was it a good idea to open the Singapore campus? Was this something that you wanted to do? Was it?
Yeah, I think it was a very good idea. As you may know, we started going to Asia in the late 70s. Why? Because one of the faculty members, Claude Janssen, was very keen on Asia and started to develop programs. And as we said, we were an entrepreneurial school, so we let him do it. And we opened the Eurasia Center. It was very successful, and at the same time, we on the board particularly did realize that the future of the economy in the world would be very much in the Pacific Basin. And that for a school that had international ambitions, we had to be very present in that region, and we were through the Eurasia Center. But people who, and we had become, in fact, the largest provider of executive education in Asia without having a campus. So a lot of people say, well, why don't you
have a campus?
Why don't you build a campus? And it was natural because we had the volume of executive education. And then when we opened the campus, the original idea was that the campus would not be subsidiary, that it would be one school, two campuses. So that if that meant that the MBA would be given there, but not the Singapore MBA. It's the INSEAD MBA. People, when they apply, don't say where they want, well, they may say it, but they don't apply to Singapore or to Fontainebleau, but they are admitted at INSEAD. Then they can go to either campus according to what they wish and according to the possibilities. But as you know, they can stay 4 months in one campus and then move between the two. And whether you start in Singapore or whether you start in Fontainebleau, it's exactly the same thing. So it's that concept, one school, two campuses, which were the only ones to have developed. Nobody else has done it.
In your 22 years as the chairman of the board, what's your most distinct memory? Is there something that you carry with you always in your heart or your head?
Well, probably the most important decision that was taken while I was chairman was the Asian dimension, the opening of the campus in Singapore, because it was a very risky thing. But there have been novelties in INSEAD every 5 or 10 years. So in 22 years, and then I'd been executive vice chairman the 10 years before, so that's 32 years. A lot of things have been invented and developed by the faculty and the deans. Each dean, in fact, during his tenure, has brought a stone to the building.
We're sitting in front of a quite lovely statue that has quite a bit to do with you.
Well, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the people who have been building INSEAD. Well, the story of this statue is that when I left the chairmanship, which is in 2004, the school very kindly wanted to give me a gift. And I said I accept a gift only if it goes back to the school. And so they scratched their heads, and Claire Pike came back with the idea of having a column like that. And I said, all right, provided all the names of the people who have been important during the last 44 years, 5 years, I've written on it, and that's what makes this statue.
I see Rameau
So
on
you
there
see
too,
all
yes.
the names of all the founders, all the chairmen, all the deputy chairmen, all the deans, and a few others. I mean, there are 40 names, I think, who are the people who built INSEAD.
If you could look into your crystal ball 50 years going forward, what would you like to see for INSEAD?
When we opened INSEAD in the first place, we knew that what we wanted to do and what we didn't want to do. We had no idea what we would be 50 years later. And I have no idea what INSEAD is going to be 50 years from now. One of the characteristics of INSEAD has been to be always flexible, pragmatic, and to take opportunities as they came, provided they were in the line of what we wanted to do. So the world is changing, so I think we'll adapt, because we've always been very adaptive, and we'll adapt. But it's very difficult to say whether we shall be in America in 10 years or whether we are going to be more active in China. I think, as I see it, I think that with our foothold and our campus in Singapore, Asia is a very interesting area for us. And I think we do more things in China, probably more things in India, and we have Abu Dhabi, so that we have a kind of continuous thing from Fontainebleau to Singapore and China. But we don't neglect Latin America, and we always think that North America is very important. I don't know whether I answered your question, but that's how I view it.
You did indeed. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.